Good evening. I'm Robin Gill with a Global News Special Report. After 5 tense days of ballot counting, the wait is finally over. Joe Biden will be the next president of the United States. Here's a live look at Wilmington, Delaware, where President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris are expected to speak to the nation. We'll take you there as soon as it begins. Now, according to the Associated Press, where we're getting our results, Biden has now surpassed the 270 electoral college votes needed to get to the White House. He has 290. Winning Pennsylvania and Nevada got him over the finish line. As we wait for Biden and Harris to appear, let's head to the U.S. Capitol, where our Washington Bureau Chief Jackson Proskow is standing by with Global's Farah Nasser. And the big questions: what are Biden's transition plans? Are they already in place? And will Donald Trump allow a smooth transition? Hi, guys.
Hi, Robin. Just quickly, before we get into all of that, just want to point out that it was 48 years ago to this very day that Joe Biden was first elected to the Senate, working in that building behind me, the Capitol building. And I was just, Jackson, I was just asking you recently what the construction is going on behind us in the Capitol building. Tell me what you tell our audience what you told me.
Yeah, Farah, you can't see it right now in the dark, but there is a wooden platform being built behind us, and that's for the inauguration. 74 days from now, on January 20th, Joe Biden will be sworn in as the 46th president of the United States on the steps of the Capitol building behind us here. And of course, lots of questions about what the time between now and then looks like. But like it or not, that is what is happening in just a few short weeks from now.
Yeah, that's a really good point. What's going to happen in the time? And I think the tone that we hear from Biden today is going to be critical for the weeks ahead. What do you expect in terms of that?
It's really going to be all about unity. In the words of Biden himself in a written statement today, it's about healing the nation and bringing the nation together. And if you listen to the campaign themes that he sort of spoke about, especially the tail end of the campaign, it was all about, setting aside whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. Biden has repeatedly said he wants to be a president for all Americans. And he's saying that at a time of unprecedented division and unprecedented challenges in this country. One specific issue in which he would like the whole country to be rowing in the same direction, of course, is the response to the pandemic. And as early as Monday, he plans to announce his COVID-19 response team as part of his transition team, sort of laying out what he plans to do as soon as he's sworn into office.
The founding fathers of this country often referred to the United States as an experiment in democracy. And now we have an incumbent who doesn't want to leave the White House. So how do you think Biden is going to address that? Will he address that tonight?
Well, there's nothing in the U.S. Constitution that says a president or a president who loses has to be in any way gracious in defeat or formally concede the election. The fact of the matter is there's an expiration date on Donald Trump's time in office, and really now it's more of a waiting game to see how the president reacts and responds as the news sinks in for him. We know he is launching all sorts of court challenges trying to dispute the vote. We know he has made these baseless accusations of widespread voter fraud. None of this has panned out so far. Those court challenges don't seem to be going anywhere. The fraud accusations certainly aren't going anywhere. Most of these claims have been debunked, or quite simply, Trump has not been able to bring the evidence to the table. And you're going to start to see in the next few days Trump's Republican allies, who've been very silent so far, essentially say it's time to put up or shut up, to be frank, if they're going to stick with him. And they will give him the right to investigate things if he wants to, but there's got to be something there if they're going to stand with him.
Let's put that aside for a second and focus on what more than half the population here in the United States is focusing on. It's a day of celebration. We've heard church bells ring, fireworks. I was at the Washington Monument earlier. 2 women were sitting there. They popped open a bottle of champagne, celebrating, as I'm sure many people are also doing at home. And there's another point and another story here, because, the glass ceiling has shattered. The race barrier has broken. Kamala Harris becomes the first woman of Black and South Asian descent to become vice president-elect. We hear, is speaking first. How will she mark this moment, Jackson?
Well, I think it's going to be a nod to the history that she is making, given the remarkable history she's making here, and given the fact that so much of the excitement about the Biden campaign is really focused on her. You talk about the parties in cities across the U.S. today, and a lot of people are taken back to 2008 when Barack Obama had his victory, and there's sort of a similar feeling out there right now. A lot of that has to do with Kamala Harris, and there are, of course, a generation of girls and young women in this country who are so inspired to see a woman finally reach the office of vice president. This is a remarkable moment. She will no doubt pause and reflect on that, reflect on the long path in her own personal life that has brought her to this position and what she plans to do with this position.
Jackson, there are other branches of government that didn't go perhaps the exact way the Democrats wanted to see. How is that going to reflect in what we'll hear tonight from both the president-elect and the vice president-elect working together with other members of Congress and the Senate?
I think there's two ways to look at it. On one hand, we're not going to find out who has the majority in the Senate until January, likely, when two runoff elections for two Georgia Senate seats are completed. Democrats had high hopes that they were going to win an outright majority, and clearly that hasn't materialized yet. It could still happen, but it's a question mark now. So they may have to dial back their ambitious plans for things like making Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico states, or perhaps expanding the size of the Supreme Court. But on the other hand, Joe Biden has painted himself as the unity candidate. And so if Republicans continue to control the Senate, you have to wonder if Joe Biden is going to use his decades in Washington as a way to try and reach across the aisle and hope that he can bring Republicans to the table and find some common ground. Because regardless of who's got the majority in the Senate, there are some serious issues that need to be dealt with, like a coronavirus relief package. That's an immediate thing that hasn't been able to be dealt with in the past few months. Both sides are stuck at a stalemate right now. And so Biden is going to have to make getting that through with compromise or without a priority.
And discussions will, of course, be happening on some very key issues like COVID-19, like obviously the racial crisis happening, climate change. There's so many things happening right now in the world. Do you think he'll be addressing any of those issues, and specifically maybe COVID, in this speech?
It seems quite likely. He's already dropped the hint that beginning Monday, his transition team is going to sort of release its own sort of coronavirus task force, sort of operating in parallel to what's happening inside the White House right now. And I think there's a couple reasons for that. One is to give Americans a sense that he has a plan that will be implemented, and the other might be to sort of coax the Trump administration into either taking this a little more seriously or at least changing its tone, because you have to remember, the president has really sort of shied away from dealing with the pandemic. The task force inside the White House not really meeting all that regularly anymore, just as cases in this country are surging. Today was the fourth day in a row of record-setting case numbers. More than 126,000 new cases today. Hospitalizations are nearing an all-time record high. Deaths are on the uptick as well. This is a crisis here as it is around the world, but it is especially bad here. And the White House strategy, or lack of one, is going to be an ongoing factor, one that Joe Biden will have to pick up and try and clean up from when he assumes the office of the presidency in January.
And there's certainly no time to waste. Jackson Prosco, thanks. Robin, I'll send it back to you.
All right, Farah Jackson, thank you so much. Of course, we will go back to you, and we are still waiting for President-elect Biden to speak. But let's talk to Eric Sorensen now and break down Biden's path to victory. Eric, you've covered politics in D.C. for a long time. Paint a picture of how Joe Biden got to this point. Eric Sorensen, can you hear me?
I'm not hearing anything, by the way, like I was hearing them before.
We're obviously having technical problems here, but we're going to go to see. We're going to go to Wilmington, Delaware now, actually, and see if President-elect Biden is ready to speak. Let's get a live shot of that. Mike Armstrong is actually in Delaware right now, and we can see the motorcade is pulling up. Mike, what's the mood like in the room there?
Boy, well, it's outside, so but I'll tell you, it was just a steady flow for an hour up until this moment, as people came from, walked from the neighborhoods around, came up to the area, speaking to people. I'll tell you, there was a couple that I met, super excited, speaking to a stranger beside them. They said, it feels like we've had our democracy brought back to us. And then the woman that they were with said, these people haven't left their house since March. And they looked at me and they said, you know, we go out for food, but that's it. This was not something we wanted to miss. So a lot of elated people, that's how I describe it, Robin.
Mike, you've spent a lot of time covering this campaign. You've been on the road for about 4 weeks, and a big part of it was being in Pennsylvania. It was such a pivotal state. Tell us more about that.
You know, I'll tell you a story about Scranton. So Joe Biden's hometown, where he lived until he was 10 years old, excuse me. It's hard to breathe with this mask on. I'm going to take it off for just a moment, and I apologize. Sorry. I'm going to tell the story without the earpiece in, and I apologize profusely. So, Joe Biden lived in a home in Scranton until he was 10 years old. His family moved away. They moved to Delaware when he was 10. He went back in 2008 when he was running as vice president, and he signed the wall upstairs and said, Joe is home. I called the family that owns that home today just to check out how they were doing. Chris Kern grew up in that house as well. He said that as soon as the call came out this morning, North Washington Street in Scranton erupted with honking horns, and it was a party outside the house all day. His mother, 85 years old, it's been a lot for her. I asked him the story about Joe Biden returning a couple of weeks ago, and he told a great story. He said, Joe Biden walked into the house, and they said, Mr. Biden, we'd like you to sign the house again. And he said, well, okay, no problem, let's go upstairs. And they said, no, we'd like you to sign down here on the first floor. And Joe Biden said, oh, I couldn't possibly sign on the first floor. You know, I don't want to sign your mom's first floor. And they said, no, it's just that every time someone comes over, we have to take them to the third floor to show them where you signed your boyhood home. So they actually ended up taking I spoke to Chris Kern, they took his sister's wedding picture off the wall. And that's where Joe Biden signed during this campaign 2 weeks ago, from this house to the White House by the grace of God. That's a great story.
Mike, those are really great stories. You actually did a great job covering so much of this American campaign. Is there a highlight for you?
A highlight? Well, it might have been the Kerns and the smiles that I heard over the phone from them today. That was great. I actually called another family today, people we met 2 years ago when we were covering the midterms, and we were outside Cincinnati, and it was a great family, actually, a couple, a little older, and one of them is a Democrat and one of them is a Republican. They've stuck together through it all, and it's not always easy, as he put it. But this election, he couldn't bring himself, the Republican, he couldn't bring himself to support Donald Trump, so he voted for the Libertarian candidate. But his wife is extremely happy tonight.
All right, thank you for that, Mike. We will come back to you later. As we wait for President-elect Joe Biden to speak, let's head back to D.C. and Reggie Cicchini, who's outside the White House. Reggie, what is the mood like in D.C. right now?
Good evening, Robin. You know, 5 months ago when we were out here during the protests following the death of George Floyd, when this plaza really became a flashpoint in those protests, the mood was anger being directed towards law enforcement, being directed towards the president. Tonight, it is a far cry from that. It is a jubilant atmosphere out here. People are singing the praises of change that are coming to this country. Not everyone in this crowd tonight is pro-Biden. Not everyone here is pro-Kamala Harris. But the vast majority of these people are anti-Donald Trump and the administration's policies and legislation that they've really been putting forward over the last 4 years. And really that flashpoint following the death of George Floyd is really what turned this plaza into a community hub to not only raise their voices against social injustices and racial injustices, but to really raise their voice against this president that they said wasn't representative of what they were feeling. This is a younger crowd who comes out here. It's these Generation Zs and these millennials who feel that their futures are on the line and that this president wasn't doing anything to fix that for them. And again, while there may not be an enthusiastic tone towards the incoming administration, anything that can bring about some change is really what they're celebrating here tonight. And there are fireworks that are going off. There are people with balloons. There are singing and dancing in the street. This really is a far cry from what we saw in this plaza just 5 months ago.
Regardless of political affiliations, do you get a sense that there is a sense of relief? Because 5 days of counting ballots, it felt like it was going on forever and we couldn't get a decision.
Yeah, look, this crowd, when we came out here earlier this week, the crowd wasn't as big, and it's grown substantially over the last 5 days. They grew impatient over that 5 days. but they also grew energetic knowing that something was going to happen. As the president, up the street from here was actively pushing back and pushing out these or trafficking these conspiracies over a fraudulent election.
Fuck Donald Trump, though! Fuck Donald Trump!
Sir, apologies for that, Robin. The crowd out here, realistically, they grew impatient with the delay, but they understood that democracy does take some time. And that while the president was pushing back these fraudulent notions that things were going wrong with the election, the crowd here understood that time was eventually going to make a decision here. And they listened to the words of President-elect Joe Biden just earlier this week when he said democracy can be messy and sometimes it might take some time, but the will of the voters is what's ultimately going to make a determination here, and that's the atmosphere that you have here tonight.
All right, Reggie, thank you so much for that. Let's go back to Eric Sorensen now. We believe we have audio. Eric, let's talk about the rise of Joe Biden. We know that in 1987 he tried to seek the nomination, didn't get it. He spent 2 terms as vice president, second in command. How did he get to this position today?
Well, I have to say, Robin, I've been watching Joe Biden for a long time. I watched and listened as he ran for president the first 2 times, and I have to say I'm in some ways stunned to think that, in 2020, at the age of 77, we see Joe Biden about to become the U.S. president, because it just didn't seem to be in the cards. When you consider the arc of his career and his life, you have to chalk it up, I think, to remarkable resilience. I mean, as a child, he was a stutterer. You can see and hear that sometimes late in his life as well. At the age of 29, he ran for the U.S. Senate. He was elected, and he became the youngest U.S. senator, the 6th youngest in the history of the United States. And so think about that. He was the 6th youngest senator, and he's about to become the oldest president. So there's this 50-year arc of being Washington for all of that period and being a primary figure there. A couple of weeks after he turned 29, after he was elected, he turned age 30, and only 3 weeks after that, his first wife and his daughter were killed in a car accident. It was such a moving experience for him. He thought of not even running and staying in the U.S. Senate because he had just been elected. He thought maybe he will just stay at home with his kids, the 2 boys, Bo and Hunter. Instead, he was persuaded by senior leadership in the Democratic Party to stay in the Senate, and he ended up remaining in the Senate for 36 years. And as you pointed out, Robin, he ran for president in 1987. Didn't really get off the ground there. He ran again in 2008, and again was an also-ran up against Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. But you'd think at the age of 65 that at that point he might be about to wind down his career. But Obama became the nominee, and at some point the Republicans were making Obama look like he wasn't ready for the job, that he was young, inexperienced, and in particular had no foreign policy experience. And so they looked over, and there was Joe Biden, who was the former chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, suddenly an ideal person to be vice president. And at the end of as he was becoming a senior citizen, suddenly he was about to be the vice president. And he was, hand in glove with President Obama for 8 years. Just a really loyal person. One of the reasons he was picked by the Obama team was they thought he would be too old in his early 70s to have any thoughts of running for president. So they felt that they would have Joe Biden's undivided attention at being the vice president for all of those years that he would be the vice president. He probably would have run, I think, in 2016, but his son Bo died, and that was in 2015, and I think he just wasn't up to the task of trying to take it on. There was also a lot of push behind Hillary Clinton's nomination in the Democratic Party, and so once again you had the feeling, well, Joe Biden's probably reached the end of his career. And then when he decided to run for the president this time around, he was not seen as a favorite at all. He was not instilling passion in the Democratic Party. He didn't have the big crowds like Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren. But by the time he got to South Carolina, when he was on his last legs, it looked like the African Americans in South Carolina, in that particular primary, recognized in Biden somebody who was calm and who was empathetic and who was steady and was just the kind of person that the party needed at this time to go into this election campaign against Donald Trump. And lo and behold, the party got behind him. And at the end of the day, the country got behind him. And it is, as I say, remarkable to think of where he had been almost 50 years ago. He was a mainstay as a very young man, and now he's just starting this brand new assignment as the President of the United States.
Let's talk about his second in command, Kamala Harris. How significant is her role going to be in this administration?
Well, I think, given Biden's age, one of the things, or many of the things that she brings to it will be different. Obviously, she's the first woman to be vice president, so there is history and the weight of expectations that come with that. But also, she's young and energetic, and she's a doer. It's the reason she was picked, and I think a lot of people expect her to be very active in the administration. It's a real unknown as to how difficult it might be for Biden at the age, because he'll be 78 in 2 weeks. So it's hard to know how vigorous he's going to be over these next 4 years. And the other thing to keep in mind is vice presidents often end up running for president. So, she's made history today. She'll make history when the inauguration in January, but she might have more history to make a few years from now if she decides to run for president.
Eric, in some of your earlier reporting during this campaign, you talked about how the Democrats wanted the White House, the House of Representatives, and the Senate. You called it a hat trick, but it's still going to be a battle for the Democrats.
Well, it especially is now because they didn't perform as well in the Senate races as they had hoped. They spent hundreds of millions of dollars to turn around certain Senate races in a few particular states. They netted at this point one extra Senate seat, so they would, if everything kind of played out right now, the Republicans would have 50 senators. There are a couple of races that can't be called yet, but they'll probably go to the Republicans, and they'll be at 50. The Democrats are at 48, and then there are 2 races that will now go to a runoff in Georgia in January. Very unusual circumstances to have that, but it's going to be a titanic struggle. Because on the one hand, if the Democrats could pull off the kind of victory that it appears they're pulling off in the presidential race in Georgia, that's a first for a northern Democrat to do that. If they were able to do that in these 2 Senate races, then the Democrats could have control of the Senate once we get to January. The Republicans will be selling it to the Georgians. You don't want to have Democrats in charge of the House and the White House, and in between that, having the Senate also fall into the hands of the Democrats and the liberal hordes that will be then running amok to change everything in Washington and in America. So there'll be, I think, a titanic struggle between the Democrats, who see it as an opportunity to really reshape the future around climate change and high tech and a lot of other things that way, versus the Republicans, who will say, slow down, you don't want the Democrats running everything in Washington.
So is there an opportunity for them to work together, or can we expect more acrimony?
Well, I think everyone will think that there's more of an opportunity to work together because it's Biden and not Donald Trump. I mean, Trump came in really with the purpose of being a disruptor. Biden had a reputation, particularly when he's in the Senate, of being collegial and working across the aisle. I mean, he knows Mitch McConnell. He knows a lot of the old senators from the Republican side. He has worked with them in the past. Some people on the Democratic side hold that against him, that he worked too closely with people that were considered racists if you go back 40 or 50 years ago. But he has that in his back pocket, and he is the type of person who wants to bring people together. I don't think he's just saying it. You've heard him in almost every speech says that he wants to govern all Americans, and he does want, I think, to bring Washington together to try and get some things done and where they can find some common ground so that the country can move forward. So I think there's an opportunity for that, in part because of who Joe Biden is.
Eric, stand by. We're going to go back to you a little later on as we wait for Biden and Harris to appear in Delaware at the Democrats' headquarters. Let's go back to the U.S. Capitol and our Washington Bureau Chief Jackson Prosko, who is standing by with Global's Farah Nasser. What are you expecting in the speech tonight?
Yeah, I think, you mentioned that conciliatory tone, or at least we heard Eric say that, Jackson. And, when we were listening to Eric speak, I mean, and the tragedy that Mr. Biden has gone through, that Joe Biden's gone through in his life, it's just incredible to see this moment and all these people here, Jackson. And you were telling me about how he used to take the train from the Capitol building home to his 2 sons, and then one son who passed away just a few years ago. And I'm sure they're thinking about him tonight. Talk to me about his family in this moment and what it means to them.
Yeah, I think, a big part of Joe Biden's story is the empathy factor. And I think that what suits him uniquely for the times that we are in, a time in which 240,000 Americans have died in the midst of this pandemic. And that is not a statistic that is going to be going away anytime soon. The number of deaths keeps increasing. I expect that Biden's empathy will be a major tone of his speech tonight, in part because I think he wants to, emphasize his interest in bridge building. And he has continually said throughout the campaign he wants to be a president for every American, not just those who voted for him. This has sort of been the struggle within the Democratic Party, because I'm sure there are Democrats who don't feel that Biden should be in any way conciliatory or seek to work with Donald Trump, being as the Trump administration made no outreach to the Obama administration in the outgoing days and really made no outreach to Democrats in the past 4 years. Nevertheless, Biden seems intent on trying to sort of bridge the divide in this country. Whether the country responds back to that is, of course, an open question, but he's going to at least try. He's going to make that a central theme here of his speech this evening.
I think it's important while we watch these crowds and while we watch Biden on stage to talk about how we got here, because Biden had been saying to the Democratic Party, I'm going to get that blue wall back. A lot of the younger Democrats thought, is this the guy who's going to get us to the White House? Talk to me about how he did that and why he resonated with so many different groups, Black Americans, for example, even just Democrats, blue-collar workers, more than Hillary Clinton did 4 years ago. How did he do that?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. There was a lot of talk about, was it possible to court soft Republicans and bring them away from Donald Trump and into the Democratic Party? That didn't really happen. I mean, when you look at the numbers at the end of the day, Donald Trump also increased his overall vote count and actually increased his standing with a number of groups. So what Biden really did was mobilize Democrats and convince them to come out to vote. And with Hillary Clinton in particular, there was an enthusiasm gap there. There were Democrats who just weren't all that keen to vote for her. There were Democrats, specifically those who voted for Bernie Sanders, who would tell you after Hillary Clinton won the nomination that, 4 years of a gamble with Trump, in their view, was better than 8 years potentially of Hillary Clinton. Well, they saw the gamble. It didn't quite work out the way they thought it would, and they came in droves for Joe Biden. And really, the Biden coalition is a story of someone who motivated voters by, appealing to their basic fears of what was at stake, broadly when it came to democracy, and more specifically when it came to the management of issues like healthcare, of the pandemic, of the economy. And you're right, Biden does have a unique ability to speak specifically to sort of blue-collar workers who may have felt that the Democratic Party had turned their back on them. He often spoke of his Scranton roots and really played that up. And that is the kind of thing that may have made some Republicans more comfortable with the idea of voting for a Democrat. But broadly speaking, I think it motivated Democrats in terms of thinking that Biden was somebody they could just quite simply get behind and be comfortable with at the end of the day.
While you were speaking on the screens there, it said, the people have chosen empathy, unity, science, all of these things that Joe Biden campaigned on. Oh, here we go. We're going to take you live to Wilmington, Delaware, where Vice President-elect Kamala Harris is now taking the stage.
Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. Thank you. Thank you. Good evening. So, thank you. Good evening. So, Congressman John Lewis, before his passing, wrote, "Democracy is not a state, it is an act." And what he meant was that America's democracy is not guaranteed. It is only as strong as our willingness to fight for it. To guard it, and never take it for granted. And protecting our democracy takes struggle, it takes sacrifice, but there is joy in it, and there is progress, because we, the people, have the power to build a better future. And when our very democracy was on the ballot in this election, with the very soul of America at stake, and the world watching, you ushered in a new day for America. To our campaign staff and volunteers, this extraordinary team, thank you for bringing more people than ever before into the democratic process. And for making this victory possible. To the poll workers and election officials across our country who have worked tirelessly to make sure every vote is counted, our nation owes you a debt of gratitude. You have protected the integrity of our democracy. And to the American people who make up our beautiful country, thank you for turning out in record numbers to make your voices heard. And I know times have been challenging, especially the last several months. The grief, sorrow, and pain, the worries and the struggles. But we have also witnessed your courage, your resilience, and the generosity of your spirit. For 4 years, you marched and organized for equality and justice, for our lives and for our planet. And then you voted. And you delivered a clear message. You chose hope and unity, decency, science, and yes, truth. You chose Joe Biden as the next president of the United States of America. And Joe is a healer, a uniter, a tested and steady hand, a person whose own experience of loss gives him a sense of purpose that will help us as a nation reclaim our own sense of purpose. And a man with a big heart who loves with abandon. It's his love for Jill, who will be an incredible First Lady. It's his love for Hunter and Ashley and his grandchildren and the entire Biden family. And while I first knew Joe as vice president, I really got to know him as the father who loved Beau, my dear friend who we remember here today. And to my husband, Doug, and our children, Cole and Ella, and my sister Maya, and our whole family, I love you all more than I can ever express. We are so grateful to Joe and Jill for welcoming our family into theirs on this incredible journey. And to the woman most responsible for my presence here today, my mother, Kamala Harris, who is always in our hearts. When she came here from India at the age of 19, she maybe didn't quite imagine this moment, but she believed so deeply and in America where a moment like this is possible. And so I am thinking about her and about the generations of women, Black women, Asian, white, Latina, Native American women, who throughout our nation's history have paved the way for this moment tonight. Women who fought and sacrificed so much for equality and liberty and justice for all, including the Black women who are often, too often, overlooked, but so often prove they are the backbone of our democracy. All the women who have worked to secure and protect the right to vote for over a century, 100 years ago, the 19th Amendment, 55 years ago with the Voting Rights Act, and now in 2020 with a new generation of women in our country who cast their ballots and continued the fight for their fundamental right to vote and be heard. Tonight I reflect on their struggle, their determination, and the strength of their vision to see what can be unburdened by what has been. And I stand on their shoulders. And what a testament it is to Joe's character that he had the audacity to break one of the most substantial barriers that exists in our country and select a woman as his vice president. But while I may be the first woman in this office, I will not be the last. Because every little girl watching tonight sees that this is a country of possibilities. And to the children of our country, regardless of your gender, our country has sent you a clear message. Dream with ambition, lead with conviction, and see yourselves in a way that others may not, simply because they've never seen it before. But know that we will applaud you every step of the way. And to the American people, no matter who you voted for, I will strive to be a vice president, like Joe was to President Obama, loyal, honest, and prepared, waking up every day thinking of you and your family. Because now is when the real work begins, the hard work, the necessary work, the good work, the essential work to save lives and beat this epidemic, to rebuild our economy so it works for working people, to root out systemic racism in our justice system and society, to combat the climate crisis, to unite our country and heal the soul of our nation. And the road ahead will not be easy, but America is ready. And so are Joe and I. We have elected a president who represents the best in us, a leader the world will respect and our children will look up to, a commander-in-chief who will respect our troops and keep our country safe, and a president for all Americans. And it is now my great honor to introduce the President-elect of the United States of America, Joe Biden.
Hello, my fellow Americans, and the people who brought me to the dance, Delawareans. I see my buddy Senator Tom Carper down there, and I think Senator Coons is there, and I think the governor's around. And is that Ruth Ann? And that former Governor Ruth Ann Minner. Most importantly, my sisters-in-law and my sister Valerie. Anyway. Folks, the people of this nation have spoken. They've delivered us a clear victory, a convincing victory, a victory for we the people. We've won with the most votes ever cast on a presidential ticket in the history of the nation. 74 million. What I must admit has surprised me. Tonight, we're seeing all over this nation, all cities and all parts of the country, indeed across the world, an outpouring of joy, of hope, renewed faith in tomorrow, bring a better day. And I'm humbled by the trust and confidence you've placed in me. I pledge to be a president who seeks not to divide, but unify, who doesn't see red states and blue states, only sees the United States. And work with all my heart, with the confidence of the whole people, to win the confidence of all of you. And for that is what America, I believe, is about. It's about people. And that's what our administration will be all about. I sought this office to restore America, to rebuild the backbone of this nation, the middle class, and to make America respected around the world again, and to unite us here at home. It's the honor of my lifetime that so many millions of Americans have voted for that vision. And now, the work of making that vision is real. It's a task, the task of our time. Folks, as I said many times before, I'm Jill's husband. And I would not be here without her love and tireless support of Jill and my son Hunter and Ashley, my daughter, and all our grandchildren and their spouses and all our family. They're my heart. Jill's a mom, a military mom, an educator, and she has dedicated her life to education. But teaching isn't just what she does, it's who she is. For American educators, this is a great day for y'all. You're going to have one of your own in the White House. And Jill's going to make a great First Lady. I'm so proud of her. And I'll have the honor of serving with the fantastic Vice President who you just heard from, Kamala Harris, who makes history as the first woman, first black woman, the first woman from South Asian descent, the first daughter of an immigrant ever elected in this country. Don't tell me it's not possible in the United States. It's long overdue. And we're reminded tonight of those who fought so hard for so many years to make this happen. But once again, America's bent the arc of the moral universe more toward justice. Kamala, Doug, like it or not, your family, you become an honorary Biden, there's no way out. All those of you who volunteered and worked the polls in the middle of this pandemic, local elected officials, you deserve a special thanks from the entire nation. And to my campaign team and all the volunteers and all who gave so much of themselves to make this moment possible, I owe you. I owe you. I owe you everything. And to all those who supported us, I'm proud of the campaign we built and ran. I'm proud of the coalition we put together, the broadest and most diverse coalition in history. Democrats, Republicans, independents, progressives, moderates, conservatives, young, old, urban, suburban, rural, gay, straight, transgender, white, Latino, Asian, Native American. I mean it, especially those moments, and especially those moments when this campaign was at its lowest ebb. The African-American community stood up again for me. You've always had my back, and I'll have yours. I said at the outset, I wanted to represent this campaign to represent and look like America. We've done that. Now that's what I want the administration to look like and act like. For all those of you who voted for President Trump, I understand the disappointment tonight. I've lost a couple times myself, but now let's give each other a chance. It's time to put away the harsh rhetoric, lower the temperature, see each other again, listen to each other again. And to make progress, we have to stop treating our opponents as our enemies. They are not our enemies. They are Americans. They're Americans. The Bible tells us, to everything there is a season, a time to build, a time to reap, and a time to sow, and a time to heal. This is the time to heal in America. Now this campaign is over. What is the will of the people? What is our mandate? I believe it's this. Americans have called upon us to marshal the forces of decency, the forces of fairness, to marshal the forces of science and the forces of hope in the great battles of our time. The battle to control the virus, the battle to build prosperity, the battle to secure your family's health care, the battle to achieve racial justice and root out systemic racism in this country. And the battle to save our planet by getting climate under control. The battle to restore decency, defend democracy, and give everybody in this country a fair shot. That's all they're asking for, a fair shot. Folks, our work begins with getting COVID under control. We cannot repair the economy, restore our vitality, or relish life's most precious moments, hugging our grandchildren, our children, our birthdays, weddings, graduations, all the moments that matter most to us until we get it under control. On Monday, I will name a group of leading scientists and experts as transition advisors to help take the Biden-Harris COVID plan and convert it into an action blueprint that will start on January the 20th, 2021. That plan will be built on bedrock science. It will be constructed out of compassion, empathy, and concern. I will spare no effort, none, or any commitment to turn around this pandemic. Folks, I'm a proud Democrat, but I will govern as an American president. I'll work as hard for those who didn't vote for me as those who did. Let this grim era of demonization in America begin to end here and now. The refusal of Democrats and Republicans to cooperate with one another, it's not some mysterious force beyond our control. It's a decision, a choice we make. And if we can decide not to cooperate, then we can decide to cooperate. And I believe that this is part of the mandate given to us from the American people. They want us to cooperate in their interest. And that's the choice I'll make. And I'll call on Congress, Democrats and Republicans alike, to make that choice with me. The American story is about slow yet steadily widening the opportunities in America. And make no mistake, too many dreams have been deferred for too long. We must make the promise of the country real for everybody, no matter their race, their ethnicity, their faith, their identity, or their disability. Folks, America has always been shaped by inflection points, by moments in time where we've made hard decisions about who we are and what we want to be. Lincoln in 1860, coming to save the Union. FDR in 1932, promising a beleaguered country a new deal. JFK in 1960, pledging a new frontier. And 12 years ago, when Barack Obama made history, he told us, yes, we can. Well, folks, we stand at an inflection point. We have an opportunity to defeat despair, to build a nation of prosperity and purpose. We can do it. I know we can. I've long talked about the battle for the soul of America. We must restore the soul of America. Our nation is shaped by the constant battle between our better angels and our darkest impulses. And what presidents say in this battle matters. It's time for our better angels to prevail. Tonight, the whole world is watching America. And I believe at our best, America is a beacon for the globe. We will lead not only by the example of our power, but by the power of our example. I've always believed, many of you heard me say it, I've always believed we can define America in one word: possibilities. That, in America, everyone should be given an opportunity to go as far as their dreams and God-given ability will take them. You see, I believe in the possibilities of this country. We're always looking ahead to an America that's freer and more just, ahead to an America that creates jobs with dignity and respect, ahead of America that cures diseases like cancer and Alzheimer's, ahead to an America that never leaves anyone behind, ahead of America that never gives up, never gives in. This is a great nation. It's always been a bad bet to bet against America. We're good people. This is the United States of America, and there's never been anything we've been not able to do when we've done it together. Folks, in the last days of the campaign, I began thinking about a hymn that means a lot to me and my family, particularly my deceased son, Bo. It captures the faith that sustains me and which I believe sustains America. And I hope it can provide some comfort and solace to 230,000 Americans who've lost a loved one to this terrible virus this year. My heart goes out to each and every one of you. Hopefully this hymn gives you solace as well. And it goes like this: and he will raise you up on eagle's wings, bear you on the breath of dawn, and make you to shine like the sun, and hold you in the palm of his hand. And now together, on eagle's wings, we embark on the work that God and history have called upon us to do, with full hearts and steady hands, with faith in America and in each other, with love of country, a thirst for justice. Let us be the nation that we know we can be, a nation united, a nation strengthened, a nation healed. The United States of America, ladies and gentlemen, there's never been anything we've tried we've not been able to do. So remember, as our grandpapa used to say when I walked out of his home when I was a kid up in Scranton, he said, "Joey, keep the faith." And our grandmother, when she was alive, she yelled, "No, Joey, spread it. Spread the faith. God love you all. May God bless America, and may God protect our troops." Thank you, thank you, thank you.
You just heard President-elect Joe Biden and his Vice President-elect Kamala Harris speaking to the American people. This is, thus far, Joe Biden's strongest speech since the campaign began. Let's go to Wilmington, Delaware, where Mike Armstrong is standing by. Mike, what's the mood outside there now?
Well, I don't know if you can hear the horns honking around me, but we're about several hundred meters actually away from where the speeches were being delivered. But whenever there was honking at the center, people are listening on their radios or watching on their phones, and people were honking around. A lot of elation, and I'll tell you, the people as they were coming to the scene, a lot of smiles, a lot of signs with jokes on them, a lot of people looking at the future in a different way. There was so much anxiety during this election, and then you could add to it the days waiting for the results to finally come out. There is a real release of joy, I could put it that way, tonight here in Delaware.
How big are the crowds there?
Well, inside, actually, since Tuesday, they've had that stage set up and that the cars moved in. They've only got a few hundred people inside. Outside, there's a fence, probably about 9 feet tall metal fence, and so you can't get inside. But there are probably a few thousand, if not several thousand people on the outside of that fence who just want to watch, to be a part of history. There is a massive American flag hung from a couple of cranes. You see that from quite a distance. And there was also a screen, so people are able to follow the speech. It felt like you're participating in something. And I'll tell you, talking to people there, seeing the smiles, hearing what they were saying, it reminded me quite a bit of 2009, being in the mall, watching the inauguration of Barack Obama. That was the feeling I got from people around me tonight.
That speech is so reminiscent of other Democrats, Al Gore, Abraham Lincoln, the reference to better angels. I feel like I've heard this speech so many times, but it is a speech that has a lot of conciliation. There's a lot of reference to immigration, a lot of references to, like, let's unite America again. Did you get that sense as well?
I quite liked when he said, if we can decide not to cooperate, then we can decide to cooperate. He also talked about having an administration that representative of America and in its diversity. That was another thing. Kamala Harris's speech, when she talked about a country of possibilities, and her mother coming to this country as a 19-year-old from India, whose daughter would one day become vice president. Oh, I believe we've got fireworks. Yeah, the fireworks have just started. Quite a celebration here.
All right, Mike Armstrong, thank you so much for your coverage this whole month long. And that is the end of our special broadcast. Of course, we will have continuing coverage and analysis right here on Global News, on our website as well, globalnews.ca. And I'll see you back here tomorrow on Global National. I'm Robin Gill. Have a great night.
This has been a special presentation from Global News.